All right, Missouri Tiger fans, your Mizzou Tigers are now 6-1 after a homecoming win, comeback from the dead win versus Auburn this past weekend, where Brady Cook goes out of the game, comes back miraculously, brings back the Tigers to win it at the very end. And we sit second place in the SEC. And why is it that none of us are happy or excited? And there's this gloomy feeling going around here with all Missouri Tiger fans. I'm going to tell you why that there's this gloomy feeling. Because I feel it too. I feel this very heavy weight on what was supposed to be kind of a magical season for this particular team. And sitting here at 6-1, again, tied for second in the SEC, one would think that we should be sitting in a position to where we should be excited, especially with the first year of the college football playoffs that are set up the way that they are. That if I were to tell you prior to the season starting that your Tigers, I would look in my crystal ball like Nostradamus. I would look into the crystal ball and tell you that your Missouri Tigers, who are preseason ranked in the top 10 and will go through all season with only one loss. I think most of us would think that the Tigers would probably have a really good shot as a one-loss team of making the college football playoffs. And I am here to tell you today, after our homecoming win against Auburn, that I don't see any path for the Tigers to make the playoffs, even if they win out and have one loss on the season. And how did we get here? How did we... It's such a bizarre season, and it's one to where I think a lot of us as Tiger fans, we were really excited because we were returning a lot of offensive firepower from last year. Luther Burden, Brady Cook, whole host of receivers, great tight end, a coach that seems to know what he's doing, great on the recruiting trail, and a defense that was going to be pretty good. And I think so far this season they've looked really good at times, and then the secondary has looked very suspect also. And unfortunately, we are sitting in a position to where even if the Tigers were to win out and be a one-loss team, I just don't see how they're going to make the college football playoffs, nor will they be able to be one of the top two teams in the SEC for the SEC championship, just the way things are kind of set up and who's tied with them at second place in the SEC and Texas A&M being ahead of them already. When you look at things leading up to this week, going down to Alabama for this, what we thought was going to be a huge game for probably both these teams. When you looked at the schedule, and especially for Missouri, where our schedule at one point, I know a lot of us were saying, hey, we were pretty lucky to draw the SEC schedule that we had this season because it wasn't one of the tougher schedules within the SEC. Still a good schedule, but it wasn't one of the tougher schedules. That has completely changed as the season has gone on. Unfortunately for Missouri, the two teams that were the highlight of our schedule, Alabama and Oklahoma, are having a not good year. And those were two games and two probably must win games that we needed to have in our resume to either get us into the college football playoffs or to make us competitive to be one of the top two teams in the SEC for the championship. And unfortunately, the two games that we highlighted are now two teams that Oklahoma is just getting curb stomped on their first year here in the SEC. So that's not looking like a good game, even if Missouri were to win that one, which I wouldn't even have Missouri as a favorite at home at this point against Oklahoma. And that's crazy to think, considering Oklahoma's season's not going very well. And then Alabama with 2 losses already. That's a game to where I think as the season was going on and people were kind of looking at the Missouri schedule and saying, well, at least if they get to the Alabama game and can knock off a top-ranked Alabama, that would be the highlight of your resume to get into the college football championship. That right now, one way to look at this game coming up this Saturday is this could be the game that Missouri ends up being the team that causes Alabama to get rid of their coach, right? You have to think that if Alabama loses this game at home after everything that's kind of gone on this season, that if Missouri goes in to Bryant-Denny Stadium and beats Alabama there, that has to be the end of Deboer, not necessarily in season, but by the end of the season. And the scary thing here is, as bad of a season as Alabama's having, right now, looking at the odds of the game, Vegas has Alabama as almost a 2-touchdown favorite over Missouri. And I can't argue that. And if I were to bet on this game, there is no way I'm taking Missouri on the road at Alabama, even in the condition that Alabama is in. Things are just every tiebreaker for the Tigers as the season has rolled on, as far as how good or how bad is this team or how much of a pretender this team, we're losing every single one of them. To the point to where twice now this season that I'm aware of, the Tigers win and are moved down into the rankings. So they have not only lost the backing of the voters from initially placing them top 10 in the preseason, they have shown nothing with the weaker schedule that they've had that you can point and say, well, what game are you seeing that the Tigers play to where they're even deserving of being top 10 or much less a top 25 team? And I can't argue against that. Early on, the very first couple games, Murray State, Missouri, 51-0 against Buffalo, 38-0. We're like, okay, first time in 80 years or something that a team has started out shutting out their opponents, and then people would be, well, it was Murray State and Buffalo. Okay, whatever. But as Missouri Tiger fans are like, well, hey, the defense is looking pretty good. They're doing what they're supposed to do against these teams. And so we were all kind of thinking, well, let's see how things go as the season were to progress. And again, keeping our eyes out for the 2 games that most people had circled, which was Alabama and Oklahoma. Now, I'm going to tell you, and not to toot my own horn, I think it was the first video that we did of the season heading into that Murray State game, and we were talking about the schedule, and yours truly went out on a limb and said, look, Oklahoma and Alabama on the schedule, those are the sexy pieces to what was going to be a beautiful puzzle that the Missouri Tigers are going to put together for this magical season. But I came out and said, but for me, the game that's going to matter is going to be that first road game at Texas A&M, and that I had just an awful feeling about that game completely derailing our championship season. Late October down in Alabama, and then that's also going to be the home game November 9th against Oklahoma. Now, those 2 games aren't the ones that I'm most worried about to derail our season. An away game, October 5th, Texas A&M. I have a terrible feeling. And sure enough, Missouri on their first test in the SEC, their first road test, they get completely demolished down in Texas A&M to the point to where they looked outclassed offense, defense, special teams, and coaching. And what had gotten me kind of nervous leading into that game was the interview that Drinkwitz had prior to, I think, the team leaving Columbia, where he said, I think somebody said, well, what are some of the things that you're worried about? And it was just kind of an odd way to answer the question. He said something about he was more worried about their first travel game and coordinating all of that and getting the team down there, that he is most worried or was worrying a lot about just the travel part of it. And I was like, we've traveled before, maybe, I mean, not necessarily with all of these players. We've got a lot of new players here on the roster. But that was the first kind of red flag that I think we kind of saw to where Drinkwitz was, there were other things kind of going on. There was something for a coach to say he's worried about kind of traveling on that first road game. And yes, against Texas A&M, that's always going to be a tough place to play. That's where I was like, yeah, I'm having so many bad feelings about what's going to happen at Texas A&M. So that's why at the beginning of the season, I said, look, the game that's going to derail the Missouri Tiger season is going to be that Texas A&M game. And sure enough, we got beat so bad that all of the writers, prognosticators, people that are doing the power rankings and the AP poll, none of them, they all jumped off the Missouri bandwagon, that this was a pretender of a team. And unfortunately, even after that game, you know, we end up going to UMass. So that kind of a game where, you know, we win 45-3. And it's like, well, shouldn't we have had a game like that on the road early on in the season before Texas A&M is going to be the first road game? But we do something like that, and then we go to, or we head home for the homecoming game against Auburn, where we win 21-17. Brady Cook leaves with I think an ankle injury or something, out of the game, goes to the hospital, and then comes back later on to lead the team down for that winning touchdown at the very end. And even though we beat Auburn at home for homecoming, Auburn's not one of the, probably is one of the bottom, if not the bottom team in the SEC this season, and Missouri continues to move down in the polls after that win. They are 6-1, and again, the second time after a win, Missouri gets moved down. The first time that happened, I'm thinking, oh, well, I get a little defensive as, you know, Missouri is my team. Oh, people hate us. They just don't believe in this team. We'll have to show them. And I think after that, we showed them that more than likely, we're not a championship caliber team. And that just, it kills me to say that. Each week, what we're telling each other is give us a game to where we see the Tigers that we recognize from last season, to where all of this offensive firepower, and you got a senior quarterback, a probably a top 5, top 10 NFL draft pick wide receiver in Luther Burden, a deep wide receiver core, a good running back core. When and where does this team start performing and how we think they should? And I think we've given them more than enough time against some of these teams to be like, you can have a couple off games to where you don't play very well, but you end up winning, so you should get credit for it. But there is no game that we have played to where, even in the ones to where we've blown out some of these cupcake teams, to where you're like, they did really well. There hasn't been a game yet. And more so that you're concerned with certain things that you're seeing, especially with Brady Cook hooking up with the receivers downhill. It's very depressing. I'm feeling you as a Tiger fan. And I sit here right now and taking a look at the strength of schedule for Missouri as of this week heading into the Alabama game. On ESPN, strength of schedule, Missouri is 73rd in the strength of schedule, which it's dead last, right next to Texas, which also has a very weak schedule. Everybody focuses in on Missouri's weak schedule, yet Texas, Ole Miss, Tennessee, they're all down there also. They all have bad schedules. Weak schedules, let's just say, overall. Although, to be fair, Ole Miss is 38, Texas is 51, Mizzou is 73rd. Okay? But where we kind of take a hit is those two games towards the end of the season where we're playing Alabama and we're playing Oklahoma, where we thought those two teams could be really good, which would bump up our remaining strength of schedule. Our remaining strength of schedule is going down as well. So right now, Missouri is 18th in the country on remaining strength of schedule. You got Florida, UK, OU, Texas A&M, Georgia, Vanderbilt's up there. 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then Missouri is kind of halfway in the SEC at 18 overall across the country with remaining strength of schedule. So we're getting no help at all with the two games prior to the season starting that were the kind of the quality games. Even if Missouri goes through and we only have the one loss to Texas A&M, there is nothing to resume build on. Beating Alabama at home is always going to look good. You'll get some credit for it. But unfortunately for us this year, it's a down Alabama team. And then Oklahoma, if you were to somehow beat them at home in Columbia, that's not going to look as good anyways because Oklahoma's having a terrible season with the schedule that they have. So we could theoretically finish the season, only have the one loss to Texas A&M, and come nowhere close because who's going to put them in when you're making the arguments for what teams make those 12 spots? I mean, if the Tigers are winning and getting pushed down in the polls, there's nobody making an argument for them anyways. And so you finish the season and you beat Alabama and you beat Oklahoma. You may get some credit again for the Alabama win if you do, which there's no way. If I had to spend my own money and bet my own money, I'm not taking Missouri in that game at all. Even with as bad as Alabama's been. They were a two touchdown favorite. It's crazy. And I'll be curious when this is all said and done, when Drinkwitz can really get into some of the details as to what happened, what's going on. I have no doubt that Drinkwitz knows what the problem is and has been trying to fix something, whatever that is, whether there's an issue with the left side of the offensive line. And the reason why I say that is he's made comments about the offensive line having issues, but when we see that on several weeks that the center and the right side have won some recognition, SEC, national recognition for the offensive line work, I have to kind of narrow things down to, okay, well, maybe it's that left side. Is there an issue with Brady Cook? Did he get some bad LASIK or something that is not being disclosed, or is something going on? Because he has not looked good. Or at least the chemistry with the receivers. Something is not right. I do think Drinkwitz knows, and I think he's tried to fix it. But where the official alarms should have gone off should have been that Texas A&M game where they had an additional week. It was their bye week. They had an additional week to get it worked out. And they played their worst game of the season. And again, looking completely outclassed top to bottom, which shouldn't happen with an SEC team or one that's much less ranked in the top 20, top 25 against another team. But if you were to say, well, what is the pathway for the Tigers to make the playoffs? Is it would have to be being a top 2 team in the SEC and making the SEC championship. That's their best odds of doing it, and I don't see that happening. Even if Texas A&M still have yet to play. Georgia, I don't have their schedule up here of the teams that are above us right now. But Missouri, if they beat Oklahoma, they beat Alabama, those are teams that are behind them anyways in the SEC. They're just going to have to keep pace with the other. I believe there's 4 other teams that are ranked or tied for second in the SEC. Missouri has their best chance, even though it may be close to 0, of being the second best team in the SEC to make that championship game. But I just can't see a scenario where the right teams end up losing. Again, and we're talking about how other teams have to fail for Missouri to kind of sneak in somehow, where they don't deserve it. They haven't deserved it yet. And I don't know if there's anything going forward right now that they can do to say, well, yeah, they would be a good team to watch in the playoffs. It's a sad sad realization as a Missouri Tiger fan, and I was very big on this season. I did have a really bad feeling about that Texas A&M game. Kudos to the person that commented on my video after the fact, after the Texas A&M game. I had posted that video. Again, it was leading into the Murray State game, I believe, the very first game of the season. I said Texas A&M is going to be the one that ruins our season. And that I thought even if Missouri goes 1 loss, it'll be very hard to make a case for them to be one of those spots. They would have to be undefeated. And that's where the weaker schedule would kind of come into play. But once you lose that one game and you have the weaker schedule, you can't make a case, unfortunately. You can't make a case. But it is going to be fun to watch this Saturday. It could be some consolation for us if we go down there to Alabama and be the reason for Deboer to get fired by the end of the season. Right? Three losses for Alabama. That's coming after Nick Saban. You can't have that. There is no way that he survives, right? If Missouri goes down there and beats them, there's no way. But maybe this is our championship game, is this Alabama game going into it. We'll see.